You think you're all ready, and then.
Yep.
Okay, the channel is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I'm Christiana Ellis,
And I'm Mike Mateen.
and tonight we're talking about video game movies then and now. An excellent suggested theme um, that you made last time, just thinking about hey, there's an old Mortal Kombat from 1995, and then they made a new one in 2021. And there's the original 2001 Lara Croft Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie, and then they made a new Tomb Raider in 2016. We should talk about those. And I had a lot of fun revisiting all of these movies, with the exception of the 2016 Tomb Raider, which was also fun, but I had not seen before.
Oh, I didn't realize you hadn't seen that.
Yeah, nope. That was the only one that I hadn't seen of this collection. But I was so inspired by the fun I had watching all of these, though, that I actually did a little extra credit and watched the sequels to the original ones. So Mortal Kombat Annihilation and Lara Croft Tomb Raider and the Cradle of Life. And as you and I briefly discussed, offline, one of those is better than the others, and it's not Mortal Kombat Annihilation. But I'll maybe just touch on those briefly. But since this was your suggested theme, tell us a little bit more about like how this came to you.
I don't remember. I think they might have been way back when. Might have been when like they were new to one of the streaming services
Hmm.
and like on like a free. So I came across it somewhere and I was like, I want to rewatch. And I don't remember if it was the Mortal Kombat or the Tomb Raider. I think it might have been the new Tomb Raider I saw somewhere, and I was like, I'd like
Hmm.
to watch that again. I was like, how could that tie in? I was like, oh yeah, there's the original. And it's like, speaking of video game action movies,
Hmm.
there's also this other set that I really like in the
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat. So it just sort of it started like that, and that's how I created it. I was like, I want to watch the original and the new one, and I
Hmm.
like both of these franchises enough to do them together. And it seemed like, and that's why we debated. There's a bunch of obviously tons of other video game movies, but
Hmm.
this one just kind of had that unique where you could just I don't know. I mean, it was just they're so different, right?
Well,
In the
yeah.
not the two franchises, but the earlier and the later versions,
Hmm.
stylistically different. And I guess what I also hadn't realized is that the later ones, both of them are done like they are going to be a reboot, but yet there has not really been any follow up on it.
Although the 2021 Mortal Kombat does have Mortal Kombat 2 supposedly coming next year.
Okay,
Same
I
cast.
hadn't seen it
Yeah.
yet. Yeah.
And then I
Okay.
think the 2016 Tomb Raider probably would have had sequels if it had, done better.
Yeah. I thought
um,
it was a lot of fun.
yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think that it deserved to do badly. But it didn't set the world on fire in the way they were hoping, clearly. So, because I think they were probably expecting, like, if this does well, we'll get some sequels, and then those sequels were not forthcoming. But one of the things that it occurred to me while we were watching these is that there's actually a new, like brand new Tomb Raider cartoon that I wondered if I should watch a little bit of, but that seems like it started to expand the scope a little too much. The only other movies that it crossed my mind to consider in this way too were Super Mario Brothers, because of course you had the original one with Bob Hoskins and oh God, what is his name? I'm blanking on his name, but the ah, yeah, that's gonna kill me. I have to. So you know the movie I'm talking about, yeah?
What I think so. Describe it again real quick.
The live action Super Mario Brothers movie with
Oh
Bob
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hoskins and Dennis Hopper and
Yes, yes, I know
And
that was like really strange. I thought
yeah, and
I don't
the
remember who the other guy is. So
yeah, I'm like it's killing me because I like absolutely know his name and I am just not placing it right now. And it is Google is giving me making me do a lot of work here trying to um, John
John
Leguizamo.
Leguizamo, I found it.
See
Yep.
again, like again, it's like it's not a person that I don't know them. It's just like the blank spot in the memory.
I mean, I was having
Anyway,
trouble. Yeah. So
but yes, so obviously we had that movie done way back in, let's see, when was this? 1993, which would have made it the first chronologically of all the ones we were talking about. Um, made when only the first Super Mario Brothers movie game had even come out. But and then the recent Illumination animated one, which is fine, you know. It's a pretty safe kids movie. But yeah, at the same time, once we start talking about doing six movies all in a go, that starts getting aggressive. And so, just the original concept had these two, and I think that they're really good for this discussion because I think in some ways it's interesting because the Tomb Raider movies, I think each version really reflects what the Tomb Raider games were like at the time they were made, which has changed dramatically over the years. Whereas Mortal Kombat, I think the games have gotten fancier, but not really that different in terms of what kind of game they are. And yet the differences in the movies just reflects differences in what we look for in movies now. So I think that's kind of interesting. But so if we wanted to talk about them chronologically, that would be Mortal Kombat, Lara Croft Tomb Raider, and then Mortal Kombat 2021. Which I don't know that we need to do them in order like that because obviously the whole point is the comparisons, right?
right.
But so, do we want to jump into one pair or the other first?
I mean, to the point of the chronological, we can start with the first Mortal Kombat and
Mm-hmm.
then, but then pair it with the other Mortal
Yeah.
Kombat discussion, and then go back and do the same
Mm-hmm.
with Tomb Raider.
Yeah. Uh, so, you and I have long shared an appreciation for the incredible cheese fest that is the 1995 Mortal Kombat movie. Um,
Yes.
and I think it's a fascinating movie to love because if someone watched it and didn't like it, just imagine trying to have the conversation where you explain to them what's good about it, and it would be really difficult.
Yeah, even more difficult because I think Deep Blue Sea kind of falls in that for us as well, right? And it's
Mm,
like when you try to explain it, like at least you can kind of point to and be like, because it's super smart sharks, right? Like
mm,
that's, and it's not pretending to be anything else. Like,
yeah,
and at least they don't maybe won't agree with you or get it, but at least you can kind of tie in what is entertaining about it. Is that it
yeah.
just leans into this ridiculous concept. This is much more difficult. It's like no, it's so cheesy and so over the top in everything. Like the
Mm-hmm.
cinematography is so like it just from the beginning, like when he wakes up and he's awash in green from the lamp, like it's so color saturated in certain things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they just completely just had fun making this movie, and it's hard to like if it doesn't catch you,
Yeah.
it's not gonna catch you, right?
All the performances are just super over the top and
Yep.
very cornball, and so every character is just very serious about the extremely silly dialogue that they're saying, and yet, like you said, it feels like the people who were making it were having fun doing so. Like there are some incredible sets in this movie that are not necessarily like huge or expansive or anything. Like, it's not an expensive looking movie,
No.
but the sets that they make, like, they have just a couple of sets where you can imagine, like, this is in half of a soundstage. But it looks so cool. It's just so elaborate and just there's packed with detail. And then they have so many different like they're emulating the game in having fights take place in very visually distinct places.
Mm,
Like the first fight with Scorpion that's just in that weird forest with all the trees that are in like unique lines with each other.
mm,
And then, they get teleported to the weird bridge over hell or something and scaffolding. And then you have the fights that are in that weird little throne room. And then the fights that are, yeah, in, Outland. And uh, there's a lot of just fun choreography where here and there they incorporate like moves from the game, right? But more than that, they do focus on just having it be a cool looking fight to watch and not over relying on this is a move that so and so uses in the game, right? There's some of that, but mostly those are standout moments rather than the bulk of the fighting. You have, but like one of the things that I was really reflecting on when I watched Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which like it's got some stuff in there that works okay, and it's so clear that like they're trying to recapture the things people liked about the first one. But I think it's maybe just a reflection that making movies is hard actually, even cheesy genre pictures,
mhm.
because somehow it just doesn't work. And I
Hey,
think part of it is that the budget is higher, but
hey,
also they try to expand the scope so much more that it ends up making it look super cheap. And then there's just weird editing decisions. Like there's a sequence where um, they have just traveled to this place and they're looking at what looks like they just went to some sort of a like an industrial park and they took footage of an ordinary looking like biotech building or something like that through the chain link fence on the outside and put then like a dumpster with a fire in it in front of the fence. And that image is what we're shown when the character's dialogue is reacting to, oh no, is the whole world like this? As in, Outworld is merging with Earth and it's ruining everything and it's the apocalypse. But that's the image that we see when she says that. And then after that, at the end of that same scene, they do a huge big special effect to make the sky look all stormy and weird. And I'm like, why wasn't that there when we have the dialogue where she's saying why it looks so weird? Like, oh, I just spilled a little bit of my water on my dog. Sorry, buddy. Um, so
my dog
bizarre decisions and things.
talks. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So there's all sorts of things about it, but the reason I'm struggling a little bit to describe it is because all of the things that I would criticize about it feel like someone could say those things about the first one too, and it would be hard to argue with them. And yet somehow it just works in the first one in a way that it doesn't in Annihilation. Even right down to somehow I texted you when I was first starting to watch the first one that I had a big grin on my face as soon as the music that dun 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 dun, dun music started and it's showing the like this Mortal Kombat logo on fire and I had a big grin on my face right away. The second one starts almost identically and somehow it was just off in a way that I didn't get that same reaction. And I don't, so I don't know. But the point is, not necessarily to talk about Mortal Kombat 1 versus Annihilation, but
Yes.
that it is unique somehow in cheesy, trashy, schlocky genre movies, whether based on a video game or not, in the sense that there's just some kind of a unique chemistry that makes this one work.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was thinking about is part of what makes this work, in addition to, like you said, the whole thing just feels like people are having fun. But one of the reasons that kind of carries through, I truly believe, is the um, camaraderie between Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, and Sonya.
Mm-hmm.
Like those three characters, just they make the cheesy banter work. Like the jokes, as silly as they are, when they're like making like they feel like people who are just kind of friendly making fun of each other, right? Like it doesn't feel like they're trying too hard, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so over the top. It feels like it's over the top by design and like have fun with it, and those three really embody it, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that the rest of the people don't kind of mix in well, but I
Mm-hmm.
really think, as I was watching it, I was like, man, this is kind of the through line, right? Like these three
Mm-hmm.
friends who don't start out as friends,
Yeah.
and just the way that they kind of come together, because they're all, and we're saying over the top, but performances, but they're all over the top in a different way, right? Like she's over the top serious cop, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then Johnny Cage is over the top like goofy Hollywood actor that
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And Liu Kang is over the top with the revenge on his brother, or saving his brother and saving his family, and
Mm-hmm.
he's the guy who's supposed to save the world or
Yeah.
whatever, and and he's just, they're so goofy. And then where you really know that they're leaning into it is when, is it Christopher Lambert, right?
Yeah, as Raiden. Mm-hmm.
And Raiden, when he is just ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? With the voice that he does,
Mm-hmm.
and like just even the some of the silly parts where he like laughs at his own jokes, and it like, but they're like end of the world, end of humanity jokes, and he's like
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. It's
Or when he
it's
does the like wagging his finger with the lightning bolts in his eyes, he's like, I don't think so. I can't even do
mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
weird of a
Yeah, it is and it
voice.
is a he makes some choices in that performance for sure. But I think you're right that the relationships between the characters, cuz the characters are all just like very broadly drawn archetypes, right? Where they establish very quickly through cinematic shorthand, this is the kind of person this is. You get it, right? And you do. You get it immediately. It's very easy. And then the three of them fit together. It's a classic dynamic. I mean, for example, let me just propose Liu Kang, Luke, Johnny Cage, Han, Sonya Blade, Leia. I
Yeah.
mean, it's that character trio. It's like there's all stories all over history that has those three kinds of people bouncing off of each other. And it works everywhere generally that it's tried because it's a tropey but effective pairing. Or what's the word for pairing except for three? I don't know. Trio.
Rio.
But in any case, yeah. So like we establish in one scene what kind of person is each of these people, and then let's just get them to the fighting tournament, right? Like
Yep.
it's in some ways it's fun once we start comparing it to the newer one, because it's almost the complete opposite in that approach, right? Because this one is like, okay, less than 5 minutes for each of these characters to say who is this person and why are they going to be in a fighting tournament. All right, we know who they are. Okay, let's get them to the fighting tournament in the next 10 minutes. And so 15 minutes in, we're fighting. It's Mortal Kombat, right? It's a fighting tournament. That's what people want to see, right? as opposed to the new one, which, while also being good, basically spends the whole movie not yet getting to the fighting tournament.
Yeah, that's it. And it's funny because so it's funny that you said that because I was actually going to one of the comparisons I was going to draw was in the reboots that do how they both truly feel like they're meant to be reboots, right? Like,
Yeah.
this one is spending so much time with like these characters and like kind of what's building and why is this like it feels like it's relaying out the universe for us so that we can have sequels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Tomb Raider one, you wouldn't necessarily you don't necessarily get that feeling until like the end,
Yeah.
right? And it's like they kind of set it up for like, hey, now we're gonna go now do this, right? Now she's become this like you don't even recognize that they're building her sort of an origin story for
Mm-hmm.
her. You can when you kind of go back and think about it, you're like, okay, yeah, that's true with like all of that. That makes sense. It was really just an origin story, but it doesn't feel. This one feels like they're making an origin story to start a franchise.
Well,
Right?
right. Like, none of our three main characters know what the deal is with the Mortal Kombat tournament at the beginning. So they are all, our eyes into this whole thing, right? I guess Liu Kang has heard of it, but he's doing the reluctant hero thing. So he needs to get told in the same way of, like, here's why you do have to do it, right? And so all three of these characters get established in the sense of by explaining to them what's going on, we are telling the audience what's going on, right? But again, in that movie, they get through that part of it in 15 minutes. And now we're in the tournament. We're at this weird island. We're fighting weird guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mortal Kombat 2021, which I do like,
Hmm.
ends without the tournament having started. That's not to say fights don't happen, but it's the point is that it's uh, one of the things that we discussed when we were initially planning this, and I don't think we discussed this. Did we discuss this at the end of the last episode? Now I can't remember. But the concept of a surf Dracula.
If we do, I don't remember it.
Okay, well, so the premise of this is there was a tweet that was basically saying it used to be on TV that if there was a show called Surf Dracula, we'd see that dude surfing and fighting bad guys every episode, every week. Whereas now you have to spend the whole first season before he even gets his surfboard.
Yeah, you did talk about this.
Yeah. And so the idea here in Mortal Kombat 2021 feels like we have to spend the whole movie getting the characters to become who they are in the game, right? It's not enough for Johnny Cage to say, "Yeah, I'm already a badass fighter. I'll go join whatever tournament." So, and Liu Kang saying, "Yeah, I got to go save my brother." Sonya is saying, "I'm fighting this conspiracy and it's led me here." And they're all like, they're already on board. They are who they need to be for Mortal Kombat. Whereas this movie, 2021 Mortal Kombat, needs to spend the whole movie getting them there. Oddly, Liu Kang is he's in this one. He is in it, but he is not one of the POV characters the way he was in the original. Like he's in there, but he's the one that's kind of already on board when everyone else is being brought in. But we have Cole Young, who is a new character original to the movie, is my understanding. I'm not like up on all of the Mortal Kombat video game lore, but I'm pretty sure that Cole Young, the protagonist of Mortal Kombat 2021, is new to that movie.
Yes, as far as I know. Hold on, it sounds like somebody's downstairs, and there shouldn't be
Okay.
anybody here. So, and I just checked, and yeah, hold on.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that we establish that brings him in to this whole business in Mortal Kombat 2021, we get a cold open where we're given a teaser of like, oh, here's kind of Scorpion and Sub-Zero's deal and like why did they hate each other? And that's all my understanding ties into the video game lore that we really didn't get anything meaningful from in the 1995 Mortal Kombat. In that one, they were just cool ninjas with superpowers that we fight, whereas they're bitter rivals across the ages in 2021. And then Cole Young, we basically learn is like he's a descendant of Scorpion, and that's why he's chosen. And they have a whole bunch of business with everyone who's chosen to be one of the fighters for Mortal Kombat is has a special little birthmark with the little dragon symbol on it. And more to the point, if you don't have one of those marks, but you fight and kill someone who does, the mark transfers to you, which is kind of a fun little bit of business. So,
No one was down there. One of my dogs was moving things around that made it sound like somebody was here.
mm-hmm. I was trying to cover by vamping about talking about the movie, but I thought you were gonna jump right in with that, but that's fine.
Uh,
So I yeah.
anyway, settle
So
down now. As long as
okay,
you settle down,
all right,
bud. He's a lot sometimes.
yeah.
I mean, he's only a little over two, and he's a
Mm-hmm.
hound dog, so he's got a ton of energy. But
Sure.
anyway,
Mm-hmm.
um, back to the Mortal Kombat's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I I think you really nailed that summation of the first one about like how quickly it
Mm-hmm.
establishes the characters, and that's also part of the fun is like you kind of recognize the skill that took to just like, hey, let's make this it you know it's like being able to like summarize something and like have to get all the important points into like one page, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
have to really know what you're doing to get a complete summary without going on too long. And that's like Johnny Cage's is so amazing, right? Like it tells you literally everything you need to know about him.
Mm-hmm.
That he's an actor, he's got some pretty cool moves. He's got kind of a good sense of humor because like when the
Mm-hmm.
one guy doesn't fall down, like the line like this is the part where you fall down and the guy like
Mm-hmm.
jumps backwards, like that's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also see like why he's frustrated that
Yeah.
people don't take him seriously, all in not even 5 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know exactly who he is.
Yeah, makes me think. Actually, it makes me think of the Three Amigos a little bit with the Martin Short character, where he really is good at the quick draw, but everyone assumes that it must be just a trick because it's in the movies. So, like Johnny Cage in this one, his frustration is like, no, I really am the best, but everyone just assumes that because movies are fake, that it means I'm not really that good. So he wants a way to like prove that he really is that good, and he is demanding that level of respect even at the same time that he's bringing like five trunks with him to the magical island where he's going to fight in a supernatural fighting tournament.
Yeah, and they don't go away from that either. Like the fight with Scorpion is probably one of the best fights in the movie because, like you already talked about, it has the cool set. It uses the
Mm-hmm.
dual set. It's got, and then but then when you just think of from the character standpoint, like what a great pairing, right? Like the one who doesn't say anything except get
Get
over
over
here,
here. Yeah.
and the guy, the wisecrack, a wisecracking Hollywood guy together,
Mm-hmm.
and then when what we don't expect to happen, I guess, and like I mean I do now obviously since I've seen it a million times, is that he's clearly a good fighter, but clearly overmatched in
Mm-hmm.
skill by Scorpion from just pure style skill, right?
Yeah.
And to the point where like also one of just I just always remember the scene where they're on the bridge because it just again it has some of these silly little touches. So like Scorpion's trying to stomp on him,
Mm-hmm.
and he has to keep rolling away. But every time he stomps, like the sand sifts through um, the boards in the flooring, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
cool little look, totally unnecessary, but additive,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It makes it feel like they are having a fight in a real place where the environment matters, instead of just saying, well, they're on a volume set and they could just change out whatever the background is and it wouldn't make any difference.
Right.
Right? Because like even in the first bit in the forest, like stuff happens in and around the trees, right? Like there's a whole thing where like the little cable that Scorpion shoots out is like, well, if you get them around the tree or make it hit the tree or whatever, and it's like it matters that that's where they are, and it makes a difference as opposed to just saying you script the fight and then you'll decide in post what kind of place it is.
Right. But it also, to kind of finish the character development, and
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't cheat on, is, so we realize that he is skilled. Clearly, he
Mm-hmm.
can kind of hold his own, but Scorpion is better. He has to basically find a way to will his way to win, and that is what makes him the best. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that he's the most talented martial artist; it's that he's determined to find a way to win. Right? He's
Mm-hmm.
good enough martial artist, but then he, like I said, he has to find the way to make the thing wrap around or to make it crash into the, by dodging out of the way, and then at the
Mm-hmm.
end, the way he finally wins that fight, which then is what buys us the credibility of how he defeats Goro, while
Right.
also obviously using his game move.
Yeah.
But
Speaking of Goro, I hadn't watched this in a little while, and honestly, one of the biggest surprises on the rewatch is there is a lot more Goro than I remembered. Because I certainly remembered the whole big final sequence with him, but I had forgotten that there are multiple several minute scenes with him like having dialogue and stuff before that. I had just totally forgotten that that was true.
and the effect still holds its own 30 years later.
Yeah, it's some amazing practical prosthetics that they're using. So for anyone who hasn't seen this movie or doesn't know the games, Goro is like 8 feet tall and has 4 arms, and a weird semi alien face. And so he like, and they use the 4 arms too. Like they have clever moves with him, like using the lower pair to grab Johnny around the middle, and then the upper pair just pounding him in the face
Yep.
because he's being held there. And it's a great look. Like it's one of those things where when people talk about the value of practical effects over CGI, it's like it is certainly true that CGI gives us the capability for some kinds of effects that it would just really be almost impossible to do any other way, and they can look fantastic. Of course, there's lots of movies where they do, but so often what you end up seeing when people complain about CGI is because instead of practical prosthetics that have a real tactile and tangible sort of touch and feel, and the people on the set can see them and react to them. Um, you end up saying, "Oh, it'll be quicker and easier with CGI," and then generally that you're not getting this level of CGI craftsmanship that you would get otherwise, and it just feels like slick and weightless by comparison. But yeah, so Goro, does he look real? No, not really. Does he look cool? Yes, very.
And he looks like, and like you said, he can do things, so it
Yeah.
doesn't look stupid,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it, like, you're not sitting in there like, wow, this is, we just had to get past this because this is pretty cheesy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then again, the movie's already bought itself so much credibility with cheesiness that,
Yeah.
like, he can be kind of cheesy, a
Right.
little bit cheesy, but
And
like he definitely holds up. Yeah.
and this movie is just absolutely not at all afraid to just throw a bunch of characters at the screen and say, yeah, this guy is a Scorpion and he does this thing and he looks like this. And then this guy is Sub Zero and he looks like this and he's does a different thing. And then this guy is a Reptile and he looks like this. And and you don't. It's kind of like if you wanted to say, well, but what's Reptile's backstory? And Mortal Kombat 1995 is like, what do you mean? What? Who cares? He's here to fight our guys. Isn't that a cool fight? He's like invisible at first, and then they see him, and then they get him, and he turns into the statue. And now looks like a ninja, and it's like, as opposed to, for example, Another approach that you can do is what Mortal Kombat 2021 does. It opens with this flashback to the people who become Sub-Zero and Scorpion, and establishing that this long history of the blood feud between their families and all of that stuff. And again, this is not to say one is better than the other. It's just the distinction of the two approaches. Either one can be done well, and I think either one is done well in these two movies, but it's definitely a different approach.
Yep.
Um, let's talk a little bit more about Mortal Kombat 2021. I think the first one is like, I love it, but it's not deep, right? It's just like, it's just fun and silly and over the top and done with love, right? It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's here to have a good time, show us some cool fights. 2021 is in some ways like that, but it's understanding that audiences expect different things now from these from movies, right? Like, generally speaking, most audiences today tend to want there to be a little bit more explanation. Who are these guys? What's their deal? Right? We want to know a little bit more about them. We want to have things feel maybe a little more grounded before they get over the top. Because there's some silly fucking stuff that happens in this movie. But it starts it at a more like grounded level, right? And we introduce Cole Young, our new guy who's not in the games, right? To be even more dramatically a character from whom we can learn about everything else, right? Like, we learn about everything with him. And we have to spend time where, like, what's his deal been? What is his conflict that he's coming from? He's down on his luck. He's good at fighting, but he's not really as able to make that work as he would like. He loves his, is it his wife and daughter? I feel like it's a little bit unclear at first.
I mean, it's his. Yeah, they're his family.
Right, but I mean, are they wife and daughter? Are they sister and mom? Like, it's. I feel like it was kind of like, I thought it was one, and then when as I watched, I was like, wait, what is it?
I guess I never really.
So the very fact that, yeah, so, and I'm looking at the wiki now. Wife Allison and daughter Emily, and I guess my point is just that it's not super clear even in the movie. Like, I don't maybe think they were intending for it to be confusing, but they're also, it's not also like really hit very hard.
Right.
Because I wouldn't have guessed that the girl we see at the beginning was his daughter until later they say that she is. But in any case, we meet him, we learn he's got this tattoo, and we get the classic no time to explain, you've got to come with me sort of introduction to all of the crazy stuff with, we've learned that the leader of Outworld, so the premise is the same, right? We got to have this tournament, and supposedly if Outworld wins 10 times in a row, they get to invade Earth, but they've already won 9 times. But even though they seem like they're coming in this with a big advantage, the evil emperor has decided, you know what? Let's not even risk it with the tournament. Let's just go and assassinate all of the chosen before the tournament even happens.
Yep.
Right? And so that's why Sub-Zero comes after Cole, and he has to get rescued by Jax and Sonya. Jax is a minor character in the first movie, and then more of a character in Annihilation. Although his arc in Annihilation is bizarre, and we don't need to get into it. But his arc in that one is that, first of all, he does not lose his actual arms. He is just like his big metal arm prostheses are literally just like wrapped around his actual arms, and his arc is that he's only wearing those because he's lost his confidence, and so it's only later when they break and he takes them off and just has his regular arms that he's actually as good as he needs to be. Anyway, um, in this one, he gets his arms frozen off and shattered by Sub Zero, and it's
Yes.
gnarly. I will say this movie, in a way that the first one does not at all, does really lean into the gore that Mortal Kombat is kind of known for in the fatalities and so on. Um, and I will say, like I get why it's there, and I don't mind it per se, but I honestly feel like the rest of the movie doesn't really match that, right? Like every time the real extreme gore happens, it feels a little bit jarring to me. Like, oh, right, that stuff happens in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's like it's not a complaint that like, oh gosh, I didn't want to see that. It's just that all of a sudden it feels like a different movie for 6 seconds. But in any case, so we have that whole plot line of him bringing in Sonya's deal is basically the same, that she's like been working on trying to figure out what this whole deal behind this tournament is. But like her arc is that she hates Kano, and she hated Kano in the first one too, and got to kill him there. But in this one, she doesn't have the little chosen mark, and she's jealous about it because Kano has one, and he like needles her about it. Um, but here's one thing that I'm just going to go ahead and note as a point in Mortal Kombat's favor is that Kano is friggin' hilarious.
Yes.
He's so good. I feel like if in a star rating perspective, a whole star of my rating of this movie is just for Kano being great. He is so entertaining. He is the highlight of the movie as far as I'm concerned. Like, there's lots of things that it does well, but he is my favorite part.
He is really good.
Which I will just go ahead and say, I really appreciated that even though he does get murdered with a garden gnome to the eye by Sonya Blade in this movie, they make a big point of all of the enemies that get dispatched in this one getting spirited away by smoke with the Emperor as he talks about how death isn't that big a deal. And so it's a relief and a pleasure to note that um, our boy Kano is returning for Mortal Kombat 2 because he's great. He's just like so much of the. Well, so for one, we don't have a Johnny Cage, right? In this movie. Like it's he's gonna be in the next one. Like this one ends with a stinger. Like they're gonna go recruit him, but he's not in this one.
Right.
And so Liu Kang is more of like a support character in this, and so Cole is really kind of our earnest. I'm in this for the right reasons guy. Um, and so then we have Sonya, who's playing basically the same role as in the first movie. And so Kano ends up being the third piece of that trio.
Right.
And it just really works. Like they put the work in. I would go ahead and say, from any traditional metric, the performances in this one are substantially better than the first. But the thing with the first one is that like those performances are perfect for that movie. These are more normally good performances, like the kinds of performances that you would normally expect for a normal movie. They're pretty good. Um, but yeah, I think that it's just the differences between these two, like the original version. It's so like even though they did make a sequel for it, it's so self-contained, right? Like it feels like it all happens within this little space right here, and that's all that we care about is everything that's happening right here in these sets, in these rooms to these people, and that's all we care about, and that's perfect. Whereas Mortal Kombat 2021 is trying to have this sweeping saga, right? Where there's history and, descendants and lineages and prophecies and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, and the deception and assassination attempts and like
Mm-hmm.
to your point, like they don't even actually have the tournament.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now they're gonna we're led to believe at the end of this one. But I think it is just kind of like it would be a substantial mark against this movie. I think that they don't even get to a tournament when that's supposedly the whole point. It's name the name of the tournament is Mortal Kombat. Like that's what the movie is called. Except that the movie is just kind of so fun in its own right that it kind of earns that goodwill back. Um, it has some issues. I think there's some weird editing or pacing stuff. Like, tell me what you think about this. I kind of think that fight with Sub Zero that they finished the movie with should have been before the montage where they actually go and are fighting all of those other guys. I know it's kind of like the emotional climax because he's having to save his wife and daughter and all of that. But that fight feels more like a penultimate fight to me.
Mm.
Whereas the other one is like for the all the marbles thing.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about that. That makes sense, though. You're right. I can definitely see that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a big problem. I think it works fine the way it is. But after what we have just watched, which is this montage of them in these weird hellscapes, like fighting enemies in pools of oil that you light on fire with great big dragons and all of these great, crazy, like traveling all over the world with portals to fight all of these guys in a big, huge, like collective montage, it sort of feels like we're stepping back. We're unheightening to go back to the fight with Sub Zero.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not really a problem. It's more just kind of like, huh, that's like it's not. It's an unexpected choice. Um, but I think it goes to the distinction between these two movies and their approaches because this one really is trying to be more focused on what is like the emotional grounding of these characters, what matters most to them, and like the whole thing of like because we already had the fight with Goro where he learns that wanting to protect people and his family in particular is what awakens his arcana and lets him have this suit of weird gold muscle armor that lets him summon weapons or something and basically works like Black Panther's suit in those movies.
yeah.
Um, so like we had that scene, right, where he's protecting his family from Guro. And then the one with Sub Zero kind of feels like a repeat of that. But these are not big complaints. It's just little things that feel sort of like there was maybe 19 drafts of this thing,
Yeah.
which there
There
probably
probably
were.
were
Yeah.
because I think this movie, I mean, I didn't read all the details, but it's like it took so long to come together because of some weird contract stuff with
Mm-hmm.
like there was basically like a three-film deal at the in the 90s for that original set,
Mm-hmm.
and then Annihilation didn't do well. They kind of shelved it, but there were still
Mm-hmm.
these contracts out there, so it was like they kind of started working on a new movie to kind of start it over again in the early 2000s, but then again with the contracts and who was involved and kind of so it's probably evolved. It probably evolved over like 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're right. There probably
Yeah.
are 19 drafts.
But just again, to like this is technically about Annihilation and not the first movie, but it ties into the first movie. But to just highlight again the different approaches between these, in the 2021, we learn who Sub Zero is, who he was before, what is his deal, what does he want, what does he care about, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the first one, he's a blue ninja that's got ice powers. That's what we know about it, right? That's literally all we know and all we care about it. And then in Annihilation, we get a new guy come up who's a blue ninja and has ice powers, and he says that guy was my dad or something, and I'm mad at you for killing him at the same time that I'm good now and going to help you. And I'm only in this scene and will never hear from me again. And it's just kind of like, boy, they're just doing whatever in this movie, aren't they? um and so like, but like they care about who it is, and so I like Scorpion in this movie, the new one, for example, as being established like that. We're on his side against Sub-Zero because Sub-Zero seems clearly like he's the aggressor, comes in and kills servants, wives, and family, right? Like that's no good. But also the implication is his desire for revenge, although denied him in life, is so severe that he goes to hell first of all, and then manages to live and come back out of hell to get revenge against Sub-Zero. Is his like story in this movie, which I think more or less lines up with what his deal is supposed to be in the games. The games have a lot of lore that I do not know or care about. But yeah, but like they work to say like we know who this person is and we have feelings about whether we want them to get it or not, right? And so this movie it's important to this movie that we understand who the characters are, where they're coming from, and where they want, which from traditional storytelling is usually what you care about. Whereas the first movie is really much more of a, we know what you're here for. You're here to see cool fights against weirdos. So let's introduce some very stock character sorts of guys. They will be played effectively but broadly. And then we're going to have some fights with weirdos with some cool techno music. It's probably even like proto techno. I'm not really like into the musical theory of it enough to kind of understand exactly like where the genres go. But in any case, we didn't talk about the music much, but there's a reason I think that they use remixes from that original movie's score in the new one because it's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, anything else about the Mortal Kombat's, or do we want to switch over to Tomb Raider now?
And I did find the thing about the production. So
Oh yeah.
they kept trying to make a new third one, and then eventually there was like budget constraints or whatever, and so
Mm-hmm.
a different company bought it. Then the guy who was directing like the web series Mortal Kombat Legacy or whatever,
Mm.
he signed on and started making it, and then he went back to the web series because it was too much trouble. And then in 2015 is when the crew who actually made it got assigned to it. So they started writing this script in 2015, 2016, probably off of a script that had been started in 2010 and
Mm-hmm.
finished in 2019. So yeah, lots of.
Yeah.
But
All right,
anyway,
but supposedly, Mortal Kombat 2 sequel to the 2021 one is coming out next year, supposedly. So,
yeah, I do see that in the Wikipedia that it's
yeah,
set to come out. So
I'll go see it.
I'll definitely see it.
I'm very happy Kano's coming back.
And there will be a Johnny Cage.
Yes, Carl Urban as Johnny Cage, which is, it's going to be a different take on Johnny Cage for sure, just because Carl Urban's older than we traditionally think of Johnny Cage being. But Carl Urban's great. Who doesn't want to see Carl Urban in a movie?
Right.
All right, so ready to talk about Tomb Raider?
Yes.
Okay. So, whereas I think the biggest differences between the Mortal Kombat movies, as discussed, is just in what they think viewers of a movie want to see. I think it's really interesting that the movies for Tomb Raider reflect the changes made to the video games over those years. Because I think Lara Croft Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie from 2001 is a very good reflection of what the Tomb Raider games were then. And then I think the 2016 Tomb Raider is a very good reflection of what the Tomb Raider games had become then. to the point where the plot of that movie is literally like it's there are many differences, but most of the plot comes straight from the 2006 or not. It was, I don't remember what year it was, but the most recent at that time Tomb Raider game from Crystal Dynamics. And so the plot of um, Lara Croft is not yet who we have come to think of her as. She's young. She's kind of a troublemaker. She's distraught because her dad went missing, and she's kind of traumatized. But she gets caught into this mystery of trying to figure out what he was doing when he went missing. And then she gets sucked into this island. There's a conspiracy with Trinity, this strange organization. Like all of that is from that game. And the arc of her being like, she's pretty tough. She's street smart. She's agile. She's good at fighting, but she doesn't have that confidence, that bravado. And she has never actually really fought anybody or really done like real adventure stuff. And then getting into that and having to her have to like kill someone for the first time, for example. Like these are beats that they're taking right from that game and doing really well. And so it is once again kind of like we were just talking about. It's like let's do an origin story, right? Let's figure out how Lara Croft becomes the Lara Croft we know. Whereas in Lara Croft Tomb Raider with 2001, Angelina Jolie is the Lara Croft we know already from the jump.
Yep.
We don't care about how she got that way. She is that way now, and that's awesome. That's so we have that amazing opening sequence where we think she's like in an ancient temple, and then she gets attacked by a robot. She's fighting the robot, and then of course it turns out that it is not only not an ancient temple, and it's not only just like, why is there a robot in an ancient temple? It's because she's made an ancient temple mock-up inside her mansion, and the robot is a training robot that her friend has designed for her to practice fighting against.
Yes.
It's great.
It's pretty good.
It's very silly, but it establishes right away that she's got her sassy butler guy and her weird little gizmo freak that makes gadgets for her, and they help her. And she lives in a giant mansion, and then she goes and gets stuff. And also Daniel Craig is there.
He's hilarious, and it's
Pre
not
Bond Daniel Craig. Yeah.
and not like he's not funny and like it's a comedy role. It's just
Mm-hmm.
funny to see him.
Yeah.
Yeah, as kind of
Yeah.
younger, wearing cargo shorts
Mm-hmm.
and you know,
So, uh,
dudes together. Yeah.
this movie, I said at the beginning of the podcast, I had fun watching all of these, but I'll definitely say that this one in particular is tons of fun up until that third act in that weird that last weird set they're in where it kind of just falls off a cliff at that point. Like it's great fun kind of right up until they get to that location, and then it kind of just starts falling all apart for me.
Yeah, I agree. And there was almost similar piece in the reboot Tomb Raider, but I feel like it recovered.
Mm-hmm.
The part where they get like imprisoned by the Trinity Corporation and enslaved, like, and she
Yeah.
has to. That part, like, it feels like it's starting to go down that, like, oh, this
Yeah,
is.
see, like that's another part where they are borrowing from like the game also kind of has that bit, but they in this movie they kind of have to go through the whole arc of that thing in like 10 minutes, and it ends up feeling really weird as opposed to in the game it's a whole like third of the game where she escapes, and then is slowly building up her skills to where she can come back and help fight off and save the rest of the people. But the game has a whole lot of other stuff that is just not included here at all. She has a whole, so like the mystery of what is actually in the place is fairly different, because the instead of it turning, like the twist in this one is that like this queen who supposedly maybe has a super weapon, it turns out that she was actually apparently a carrier of some deadly plague, and so she locked herself away to keep it from the rest of the world in this big sacrificial thing, as opposed to everyone sort of had to lock her away to keep her from. But so in like it doesn't matter. I could explain how the game does it differently. It's basically there's a lot more to it. There's more characters and there's a lot more going on. So they streamline it dramatically. Um, but I will say for the 2016 Tomb Raider, in very much the same way that the movie gets that 2021 Mortal Kombat gets a whole extra star for me just for Kano being so entertaining. Walton Goggins in this Tomb Raider is so fun because he is the bad guy, but
Yeah.
it is so refreshing to have the bad guy, who certainly is ruthless and amoral and all of that, but he could not give less of a shit about what is in this temple. It's just that his boss wants it and has told him you can't come home until you get it. And so it's like, I don't care what it is. I don't want it. I'm not interested. I just want to go home, and I can't until I get that thing.
Yes.
I love that. That is so much fun because it makes his motivations interesting in a way that that type of character in these types of movies often aren't. Case in point, in the guy in Lara Croft Tomb Raider.
Oh, the Illuminati
Either of
guy.
those guys.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because we have the one boss and his underling that's supposedly working for him, but then he actually betrays him and blah, 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 blah. Who cares, right? It's not interesting. It's so just comic booky flat. Like, there's lots of fun stuff in Lara Croft Tomb Raider, but that part, the villains are not terribly exciting.
No, and the whole time bending thing
Yeah.
doesn't make a ton of like sense,
Yes.
even in with the like.
The plot, everybody should know, the plot of Lara Croft Tomb Raider is that once upon a time, there was an alien triangle that could control time. But because that's very dangerous, obviously, somebody or other broke it into two pieces and hid them across the land. And so now the bad guys want to get those two pieces of a triangle and put them back together so they can control time again. We got to stop them.
But it can only happen when like planets are in alignment.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm. And it's very silly. Like there's some fun, really fun stuff going along with it. Like for example, I thought the whole bit of they finally get the two halves of the triangle and put them together, but it doesn't work. And Lara realizes it's because this weird little compass they've been using to find the pieces, it works because it has a tiny little sliver of the triangle in it, and so therefore it won't actually work until you get that piece too, right? I thought that was a clever little bit, for example. And I think that the big what is it's not an orrery, is it? Is what's the? I think that is the word actually. The the like mechanical model of like planet orbits and everything.
yeah.
Like that whole set, it kind of like looks cool in the immediate sense, but as soon as they're trying to set this whole action set piece on it, it just suddenly starts feeling very awkward and clunky. Compare that though to the bit from earlier where they had to find the first piece of the triangle, where there's a whole elaborate thing, Indiana Jones style ancient booby traps and everything that all leads up to the way it has to work is that it will eventually reveal this big, huge glass jar, and a whole big log with a needle on it has to swing and pierce it, except that it doesn't work and she has to jump on it to like give it more momentum to finally break it. And all of that happens, and at the end you're like, you couldn't have had someone just reach into the jar to get it out of there. You have to break it with the big swinging thing. Like that is actually a recurring bit in all of these kinds of adventure movies, is that you have the super smart person who has to figure out the secret code or the hidden entrance or whatever. This is like Indiana Jones too, where um, you have the person who really knows their stuff have to figure out the secret temple and how to get in and how to solve the whatever. But as soon as they do that, anybody else can immediately access that point from anywhere. Like, oh, yes, we have finally found this secret underground temple that we had to get through by navigating tunnels of booby traps and solving secret doors and everything. But now people can just take a helicopter here. Now that it's been opened, people can just get there from wherever.
Yeah.
That becomes really dramatic in Cradle of Life, the sequel to this Angelina Jolie one.
Yes. I do say that there are some parts where that same scene, that whole scene is pretty effective for a couple of reasons.
Mm.
Like, because they're in two different, because they've entered the temple separately, Daniel Craig and Lara Croft.
Yeah,
Um,
because Daniel Craig's still working for the Illuminati at that point.
right. And he solves like a key piece of the puzzle that actually requires like labor to get like the swords right into
Yeah,
the right places. But he gets wrong where the clock is supposed to go.
right.
And it's a really interesting like just dynamic where like she's persuading Powell to give her the clock that
Mm-hmm.
he's wrong, but yet she couldn't have been in that position had Weston, as Daniel Craig's character, Weston Powell, not had the mercenaries with them, the commandos with them to put the
Mm-hmm.
swords in. Like I just thought the whole thing kind of came together in kind of a fun way, even as
Yeah,
ridiculous as it
yeah.
was.
I agree. It's one of those things where it's just the sort of the so-called refrigerator logic. The stuff that like makes perfect sense when you watch it on screen, but then when you get up to get a snack at the refrigerator, you're suddenly thinking, "But wait a minute, why didn't they just?" Right. It's like full of that kinds of stuff. So like the idea that like, oh, the triangle is revealed in this big glass jar. I mean, technically speaking though, like they wouldn't have known that it was there to look until the whole thing gets revealed, even though theoretically, if they had known, they could have just gotten it without going through all the rest of that stuff. Um,
It
but
was
I,
unclear, whatever the swords did, it was
yeah,
unclear why they had to be in there
right.
before.
But
It
we
didn't
have
matter.
to establish, see, from a movie making perspective, we have to establish the swords so that when the CGI stone golems wake up, they can draw the swords.
Oh yes, yes, of course.
Yeah. Because we get that whole sequence too, and it looks terrible. It's 2001 era CGI, and it's pretty bad. But it's a fun sequence, right? Like the effects don't look good. It's actually weird how bad they look compared to the robot from the beginning, because that robot actually looked pretty good.
Yeah, and that was another point that I couldn't decide if I liked that they could kill the stone things with guns or not. Like
I
it kind of felt at first like it didn't seem like you should be able to, since they're
mm,
like a you know whatever, a mystical thing made out of rock. But
yeah.
yes, that those guns are powerful enough, they chip stone, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so you could damage these things and
Right.
kill them. But it was just kind of like it was like a weird feeling. Like you're
Yeah,
like, oh,
I
you can just use
I
these
get
things.
what you're saying. I do kind of like it because, for
Mhm.
example, I kind of like the concept of something that before modern weaponry would have essentially been unbeatable.
Yes.
But it has been hundreds and hundreds of years since then. And you do have modern weaponry. And it's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to shoot a machine gun at a stone wall. But it's another thing if it's animated small pieces of stone moving around, right? You could blast parts off of that. I think that it works logically in my head. You know what I mean?
No, it definitely
Yeah.
did. Like I thought
Hmm.
about it, like the caliber of guns that they had would definitely
But
shape in stone.
I
Yeah.
can see what you mean, though, in the sense that you can kind of weigh in your head what is more fun to see on screen, for the guns to work or not to work, right? Because you could sell it either way.
Yes. I like that they work too because then
Hmm.
it gives them a realistic fighting chance, right? Like they
Right.
don't have to do something. They are still an imposing
Hmm.
foe,
Right.
but yet they're not this like unbeatable thing that we're somehow going to escape
Hmm.
from with something ridiculous, right? It's
Yeah.
not a ridiculous way you get away from them. You just they're just very difficult. You just have to shoot them.
Hmm.
The bigger one is harder because it can switch its face and not
Right.
and continue to like regenerate essentially.
Yeah.
Not really, but it like yeah
Right.
changes its
Um,
face. It's whole again. You know.
yeah. That's a fun gag. And then, of
Yeah.
course, we bring back the big swinging thing to take out the big monster. See, because one part of what's fun about that whole sequence is all of the initial stuff that looks just like weird window dressing becomes functional once the fight starts.
Yes. The
Um,
film architect very well. I don't know if that's the right word, but well, you know,
mhm,
like even the final one with the time stuff, it
mhm.
just it's just same thing. Refrigerator logic. You're like, wait, why can she save him but not him? But like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, so I think most of that last act really just doesn't work very well. There's a couple of cool moments. Like, I do like when she finally does get the triangle. So we had just established before her having to run up the weird extra dimensional pyramid to grab a thing before the other guy can race up the other side of the pyramid. Like, what? Like, that was just suddenly like, where is this coming from? This feels like bizarre. But we had seen Daniel Craig get a switchblade to the chest. It was thrown at him, and so now that she's got the triangle of time, she can go back and like she's just like waltzing through, and we see her have to like really work to turn the knife around so that it'll fly back and hit the bad guy instead. I loved that they made that hard to do, right? Like it wasn't just like casually she could just go in and like flip it around. Like she had to work at it, and when she cuts her hand on the knife, it's like
Right.
vibrating.
Yeah,
Like
because she
that.
needs to use both hands, so she has to like grab the blade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought that piece of it was pretty cool. But yeah, like the whole final sequence in that location is pretty nonsensical, and it kind of goes on like 5 minutes too long once everything starts to fall apart. Like, why doesn't the guy just die from the knife? Like, why do we have to then have a whole nother thing where he's there almost dead, but then he's got his gun and blah. Like, none of that's necessary. But in any case, it's the movie
But that's where it
brought.
goes back to, you know, we focus so much on like how these reflected the way that the
Mm-hmm.
video games were at the time, but these do also reflect how movies were at their
Yeah,
time
it's true. It's
at
true. Yeah.
times as well. You know, this is kind of too many CGI when they weren't quite ready for it. You know,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
the villain who has to come back one last time because it's just like that was like a thing around that
Mm-hmm.
time. Reason, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Um, and so, but one of the other things that I think we really need to talk about in terms of comparing these two is the depiction of Laura Croft, right? Because we established in one case that Angelina Jolie she is the Laura Croft from the games already. That's who she is. She's badass. Um, and then the Lara Croft in the new one is learning to be that. She's younger. She hasn't had all of that experience yet. But one of the big differences that produces is something that we've talked about several times before, in particular when we were talking James Bond versus Mission Impossible. It's the difference when with an adventure character of, do they make everything look easy or do they make everything look hard? And Angelina Jolie's Lara Croft is very much solidly in, she makes everything look easy.
Yep.
Like, it is a rare circumstance that she is forced to do more than a basic effort for anything. She never loses her cool. She is on top of, and one step ahead of every situation. Um, with the rare exception. right? Like when Daniel Craig gets stabbed with a knife, right? For example, that she didn't want that to happen. That was the rare L that she is able to literally time travel away.
Yes.
Whereas for Lara Croft in the new one, she's new. She doesn't have all that experience. And so basically everything she tries goes poorly until gradually over the course of the movie, she starts gaining some confidence and starts getting, um, getting to that place where she's going to be better at doing things. But for most of the movie, she's more in the Ethan Hunt, Indiana Jones vein of every time she tries something, it doesn't quite work the way she wanted. And she barely gets through by the skin of her teeth.
Yeah, that's why. So, one of my favorite scenes that does kind of establish that point, but is also like I'm always somewhat conflicted by how I feel when I watch it, is early on when she takes on the Fox and the Hound bicycle
Mm-hmm.
game gamble, because it's so cool and like so just flashy and fun and everything about it. But then because she loses her focus because of her dad at one point, like she
Mm-hmm.
crashes into a police car and the whole thing just sort of comes to an end, right? Like
Yeah.
it's so climactic how that fun scene ends
Mm-hmm.
that it's like almost like I wish it didn't end that way, but then it's also so critical to the movie that to show that like, hey, she's almost there, but like
Yeah.
she's not, and it gives us obviously the way for it to be introduced into what's going on and that she really is rich, just like Angelina Jolie is in the first
Mm-hmm.
one. She refuses to sign off that her father is
Right.
dead.
Yeah. She doesn't
And
inherit everything until she is willing to acknowledge that he's dead. And she doesn't want to do that. And then, of course, it turns out in this that he's not dead. In fact, he's Dominic West. West. He's who is more of a part of the movie than I think we expected earlier on. It's kind of like when he shows up, it's like, oh, not only is he not dead, but he is just now a third lead for the rest of the movie.
yes,
um, but he's fun. Always like to see him. I think he's good in this. Even though I think he is given an unenviable task in this movie of rooting against the thing that we all want to see happen, right? We want to see what's in the temple, and he's the one saying, don't do it. Let them kill me to not even open the door. But
right,
we want to see what's in there. And so for him to have to be rooting against the thing that we as the audience want to see happen is a hard role to play. I think he does
yes,
it pretty well, though.
he does. Yeah,
Um, I was going to say something else about that. Now I can't remember. Oh, I do want to shout out one particular moment of this movie, though, as I think the movie does a great job, broadly speaking, of getting us into this Indiana Jones style or Tomb Raider style for that matter. At first, not supernatural, and then gently supernatural, adventure, pulpy sort of setting, right? And feeling relatively grounded in that way, and not feeling to use some finger quotes here, video gamey, right up until the part where she says, "Can you guess the line that I'm talking about?"
I, I I think I know what you're talking about, but I can't
Oh,
place it.
it's a color puzzle.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
She says, "Oh, it's a color puzzle," out loud in the dialogue of this movie. And that was just the most video gamey line in the whole thing. Because, it's one thing for them to have to solve a puzzle to get out of this trap that they're in, but for her to just be looking at it and trying to figure out and then saying, "Oh, it's a color puzzle." Just like, all right. Let's not let anybody forget what kind of story this is. Um, I laughed out loud when she said that.
I did too. I didn't realize that was the line you were talking about,
Yeah.
but it makes total. Yes, I laughed as well.
hmm yeah. So, and I think that there was some, yeah. But so, like again, I think there's some really great stuff in both of these movies, but the tone is so different, and I think that's really interesting. And so, even though, like just broadly speaking, I enjoy all these movies, I think I really enjoyed coming at them from this perspective of like looking at the differences between, you know, because both of these Tomb Raider movies very much reflect the kind of Tomb Raider games being made at that time. Just because I talked a little bit about Mortal Kombat Annihilation, I'll also talk just a little bit about Tomb Raider and the Cradle of Life. Um, it has an opening sequence that I think has the part that you remembered is I think you described it as a very dumb scene with a shark. And yes, she does at one point have a shark charging her in the water, and she punches it in the nose, and then as it recoils away, she grabs its dorsal fin and then rides it up to the surface. And it is very silly. And I will say that whole opening sequence is like weirdly flat and kind of lifeless. Given like the stuff that's happening feels like it should be working better than it actually is working for reasons that are not 100% clear. But I will say, after that sequence, the whole rest of it is actually pretty great. And I think it's more consistent than the first one. It doesn't have that Act 3 fall off like the first one does.
Yeah, I might go back
Yeah.
and
I,
watch it
I
at
think
some point. Yeah.
if people liked this first Angelina Jolie one, definitely watch the second one if you haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a long time. I think it's worth it. It's also got Gerard Butler in it instead of Daniel Craig, and they do some interesting stuff with him.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
um,
but clearly that the opening sequence that was flat stuck with me because I was the only. I told you that's literally the only thing I remember about that
yeah.
movie. There was a thing with the shark, and I didn't want to say that she rode a shark because I was like, it can't be that.
No,
But
she
that's
absolutely rides a shark.
I was like, that's what I remember happening.
I feel
But
like that's probably something that has happened in one of the games, though. It feels like something that might happen in a game. But in any case, I agree that stunt, like I don't know, it's silly, but it didn't feel like to an extreme for me. But I think that whole sequence, which basically has them finding an underwater temple, and they don't really do a super good job of establishing like where the temple is or is happening, because like they basically go up inside it and it's dry except that the whole place is supposed to be underwater, and so I guess it's supposed to be like an air pocket. But if that's the case, it would have had to be an air pocket that has been present for like 10,000 years or something like that. Not 10,000 years, but 4,000. Anyway, the point just being that it's like feels a little bit like what's going on here, and just that there's an action sequence there, but for being the cold open of the movie, it's weirdly bad. But I think the rest of the movie is actually really great, and we get lots more of Sassy Butler and Gizmo Freak, and Jimon Hunsu's in it, and Gerard Butler. It's funny because I have also just recently rewatched the Phantom of the Opera movie. Don't do that, folks. It's not good, but also had Gerard Butler in it when he was still trying to do handsome leading man stuff before 300 revamped his whole deal.
I'm
But
just not a fan of that story in general, not just the
what?
movie.
Oh, Phantom of the Opera, or
Yeah.
yeah. Oh no, I mean, it's like I don't have like I never saw the play or anything like that, so I haven't. It's one thing to see it as like a live stage production, but I would say I think that there's a lot of weaknesses to the story, music, and dialogue,
Yes.
even before you get into the specific production of that movie, which is also not really great. Like that's another movie that has lots of sequences where you feel like if you were to just describe what's happening in the scene on paper, it seems like it would be great, and yet, anyway. Um, we're not talking about Phantom of the Opera. We're talking about Tomb Raider. But we're done talking about Tomb Raider, I think. So, anything else with Tomb Raider, or do we want to talk about our plans for next time?
No, just had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I did too. Um, I have one the top of mind proposal is that we have in the past sometimes taken a filmmaker that had a couple of movies that we'd already talked about, but like, let's revisit some of their other movies that are maybe less revisited. And
Yep.
I was thinking about Paul Thomas Anderson because we just fairly recently did There Will Be Blood, and we've previously done Magnolia and Boogie Nights, but he has made several other movies. So I wonder, I was proposing the possibility of maybe checking out a couple of his other movies. What do you think?
I think that's fine. I'm pulling them up right now.
Yeah, so like there's a few that I haven't seen in a while, like Punch Drunk Love, for example. Um, and um, Phantom Thread, I really liked in the theater but haven't rewatched. What is. Boy, he's got a lot of music videos and shorts on stuff that makes it more complicated to look at his IMDb than I was expecting. So, movies that he's done that we haven't yet talked about. Hard Eight was his first one. Um, did Boogie Nights, we did Magnolia. Punch Drunk Love is there. We did There Will Be Blood. There's The Master. There's Inherent Vice. And then Phantom Thread, and then Licorice Pizza was his most recent. Do we want to maybe pick three of those? Or even just two? I don't know. What do you think? Are there any of those that
Yeah.
leap out to you?
I I would like to see Inherent Vice.
Okay. That's one that I struggled with when I first watched it because it's very weird, but I would be happy to like revisit it.
Yeah, I think that was one that I'd always intended to watch and never
Mm-hmm.
did.
Okay. So how about that one and Punch Drunk Love? Because that was the other one that I was just feeling like I remember really liking it when I saw it, but I have not seen it since 2002 when it came out.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. All right. So I think when next we meet, we'll be talking about Paul Thomas Anderson's Punch Drunk Love and Inherent Vice. All right. That's it for tonight, everybody. Thanks for listening and or watching, and watch good movies.
Watch good movies.